good morning? Okay. Our time of tranquility is over. Will you do it? Cheer for the Leafs? You might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Now,
Which rhetorical strategies does Freeland use to address the audience at Northeastern University in Boston? And what do these strategies tell us about her hidden agenda? This is important to know, not just for this speech, but for all political speeches, to make sure that no one deceives or manipulates us. Welcome to the channel where we get to the bottom of what influential people are saying, what they're really saying. Welcome aboard. The more Freeland speaks, the more she reveals the real agenda behind her speech. So stay tuned, because things are about to get spicy. What do you think about the speech? Let us know in the comments. There are 5 phases in structuring a political speech. Invention, where the speaker chooses her arguments. Disposition, where the speaker structures the different parts of her speech. Elocution, this is the part of the speech that's most important to us, because this is where the speaker uses different rhetorical tactics to get their message across. Memoria, meaning that the speaker memorizes the speech. Action, which is where the speaker performs the speech, and speeches are indeed performances. There's rarely any spontaneity or improvisation to them. That was the structure. Let's look at the content strategies. Freeland's speech is a so-called epidictic speech, meaning that it appeals to shared values, alleged shared values, that as many people as possible will agree with. A shared value system is the gateway for the audience to identify themselves with the speaker, which is what the speaker is really after. Speeches are always about persuasion, persuading people to think and feel a certain way. And this is where constitutive rhetoric, CR, comes into the picture. According to CR, interpellation is the primary purpose of a political speech. Interpellation is when the hearer becomes aware that they're being addressed by the speaker, that the speech is about or concerns them. This way, a certain self-understanding or self-perception is ascribed to the hearer, making it easier for the speaker to persuade the hearer. In this process, the speaker links the past to the present and future. Rhetorically, the speaker creates a collective identity, a collective we across time and space that's allegedly been in existence for a long time, a we that's being called to do or believe something. However, the controversial aspect of CR, and the aspect that the speaker doesn't want the audience to focus on, is that the audience doesn't exist prior to the speech, but that the speaker presupposes it exists. That's the trick, because who says that people are alike just because they share the same innate characteristics or have studied at the same university? The speaker does. The speaker decides that. Ultimately, then, the audience exists because the speaker says it exists. The speaker meditates and presumes shared values and gives recommendations to future policies and future actions that the speaker wants the audience to applaud and take.
good morning. It is so great to be here. Good morning. Want to say good morning? Okay, energy from the graduate class. Come on. Yeah!
In speeches, politicians often start out this way, saying something funny in order to be perceived as down-to-earth, laid back, and similar cliches that they've been carefully trained in. And people laugh more the less a speaker is expected or supposed to be funny.
I like to start with something funny. And one Sunday morning, this pastor was in the pulpit preaching away when he noticed a man on the front row sound asleep. Finally, he stopped in the middle of his message, said to the man sitting next to him, "Would you please wake that man up?" The man said, "Wake him up yourself. You put him to sleep."
A hysterical joke like this relies on the so-called incongruity theory of humor, meaning that there's a certain disparity between the setting, a church gathering, which, traditionally at least, is serious and involves formal clothing, and the preacher's informal remarks. It's all aimed at making the audience like the speaker, because liking leads to identification, and identification leads to money and power. Freeland has more identification tactics up her sleeve. Or had more like it.
The Stanley Cup playoffs. And just maybe the Bostonians among you will find it deep, deep in your hearts to cheer a bit for us too. Will you do it? Cheer for the Leafs? A little. Common enemy, okay?
Next, we get a first glimpse of the epidictic nature of this speech, Freeland's being as generic and vague as possible in order to win as many audience members as possible. Let's see how she does it.
So I'd like to thank you, President Oun, and everyone here at Northeastern for the very humbling opportunity to address this remarkable graduate class. 5,717 talented and exceptionally motivated graduates. A global student body, look at you guys, look at your flags, and a school with a true global vision. The challenges of your generation are not the monopoly of any one country or continent, nor will they be solved by anyone acting alone. There is not a graduate class anywhere in the world that is better prepared to face them. Congratulations!
Firstly, calling over 5,000 students remarkable is a way in which politicians can flatter the audience they hope to win, because, of course, there's no way of knowing that each person is remarkable, and she can't know if this is the graduate class most prepared to face the challenges, not problems, mind you, she refers to. However, that's exactly what CR is about, ignoring individual differences and making people see themselves as a group, as a collective. That's the oversimplification which rhetoric is aimed at. The interpolation process is in full action, getting the audience to see themselves as the persona in the speech. In theory, this makes persuasion easier. Secondly, she uses the adjective global, which has become a buzzword that politicians and other truly authentic and deep people use in order to be in good standing with the buzzword club they want to remain part of.
And it was incredibly inspiring, the resounding themes that came up about representation, about inclusion, and about trying to shift the global perspective for all of us as a global community.
Freeland's argument isn't an actual argument as it rests on a presupposition which provides a sense of circularity. Her claim, which is implicit and is actually a presupposition, is that the university's supposed global vision, whatever that means, is good. Why? Because the challenges, which is the euphemism she uses in order to sound positive, won't be solved by one country. These are the grounds, so-called because they rest on a presupposition that the challenges, whatever they are, won't be solved by one country. That's where the circularity comes in. Arguments, in lack of a better term, that sound good and positive aren't always good and positive. Oftentimes they're devoid of definitions, and thus meaning. Next, the CR is about to be on full display. Freeland links the students to their relatives in order to create a collective we across time and space. And she repeats the same presuppositions and flattery, just in case anyone missed this lovely combination the first time.
But I'd like to start where your stories all started. So to all of the villages that raised the remarkable young people here today, thank you very, very much. Can you thank your parents and grandparents and all those guys?
To Freeland, however, it's not enough to include relatives in the speech. We need more people. So what does she do? She gives a personal narrative about her family as a bridge to stating what she wants the audience to fight for and believe in, and branding herself in the process, which is what this speech is really about. First, let's hear what she says about herself and her family.
The true story, the third story I want to tell you, is about the pearl necklace I'm wearing today. Here it is, hidden by the robe. And this is a story about the peril and the power of coming of age during an age of change. My paternal grandmother, Helen Freeland, gave me these pearls on my wedding day. She told me my grandfather, John Wilbur Freeland, had given them to her 45 years earlier on the day he graduated from law school to thank her for her support. 3 Freeland boys crossed an ocean to fight their generation's battle for democracy. Only 2 came home. Pretty Boy Freeland went from lassos to law school, part of an army of educated veterans across our triumphant, grateful continent that this school, your school, played a noble role in teaching. They came home determined to make their countries better.
She brands herself as a person whose family came from humble beginnings, which in theory strengthens the identification process. She's obviously planned to wear this necklace for a deixis moment. Deixis means that the speaker can physically point to what they want the audience to applaud them for. People react more to things they can physically see. However, she does more than that. Our triumphant, grateful continent, she says, before linking the university to this collective we. This is a meditation on alleged shared values. It's an appeal to continental ethos, competence and credibility. And hopefully she successfully interpolated the audience in her speech by now, so that they recognize themselves in the possessive pronoun our. Next, Freeland continues to make the audience recognize themselves in her family members. She goes from they to we, linking the past to the present and, by implication, future.
Their fight for that better life back home was remarkably successful. Theirs was the era of les 30 glorieuses, 3 decades of extraordinary prosperity. And they succeeded, I believe, for 2 reasons. Their conviction that they could accomplish big things, and their determination, having already sacrificed a great deal, to use their strength for the collective benefit. Don't retreat. Rise to the challenge of your time. Help others. Make a difference for your country. Coming of age in a time of change must be frightening, but it is also a privilege. And with the education you have received at this exceptional school, you have earned the opportunity to shape the future, your planet's, your country's, and your own.
This is another important aspect of CR. Rhetoric is always about oversimplification. CR is about more than that. It's about making people forget that people and events from the past can't be directly linked to the present and hence future. Freeland implies that if they could achieve prosperity in the past, we can do it today too, ignoring the objection that the two contexts aren't necessarily comparable. Also, the words conviction and determination are part of the intentional vagueness that's a standard part of political rhetoric. The platitude, rise to the challenge of your time, which is devoid of specific meaning, and the commands, help others and make a difference for your country, might sound good on a surface level. However, firstly, it's vague and generic because who says they're all working towards the same difference? And what difference specifically? Secondly, euphemizing language, which by definition is unspecific, is never a good sign. Too often, politicians have used euphemisms and lofty ideals when they know that the truth is a lot darker than merely rising to a challenge. Euphemisms are frequently used in times of war. However, rising to a challenge sounds a lot nicer than risking your lives, which is the whole point of euphemisms, and which is why interrogators largely regard euphemisms as deceptive. A time of change, she says. It's interesting how, according to politicians, we've always lived in a time of change. They needed to be a time of change because otherwise their CR wouldn't work. CR is about getting the audience to do something in the real world, the third and final effect, and you can't get anyone to do anything if you say there's stability and peace. Freeland keeps hammering this point.
Our time of tranquility is over, and we are living in an age of change. We're living through what President Biden, on a visit to my country in March, called an inflection point, a time of transformation. Now, like it or not, you are graduating into that inflection point.
According to politicians, there's never a time of tranquility. There's no money and power in tranquility, whatever that means, and we can't have that. The reason why war is an adjacent connotation is because she touches on it multiple times.
And I really pray there will never be beaches for you to storm.
Next, she implies it through a personal narrative, Politicians use narratives to vivify cold facts and statistics, and to brand themselves. Ultimately, the narratives they tell about ordinary people are mostly about themselves, how they supposedly reacted to the narrative.
I do not want to suggest that the fight for democracy will be easy, or even that I know, or that anyone knows what exactly we need to do in order to secure our democratic renaissance. You cannot opt out of a time of change. As Trotsky said of another turbulent time, you might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you.
Now change doesn't sound so positive anymore, which exposes the word for the euphemism that it is, and which exposes her speech for being deliberately indirect at best and deceptive at worst.
And so I'd like to share 3 stories for you to keep in mind as you navigate the turbulence beyond this historic stadium. The first is the story of Victoria and of the power of resilience.
Here we have the 3 ideological effects in full action. The first 2 effects are about making the audience look beyond the here and now and recognize themselves as the collective we in the speech. And the third effect is hinted at via the noun resilience, the exact kind of resilience she wants the audience to have. That's why this type of rhetoric is called constitutive. The speaker creates an audience simply by presupposing that it exists, and links the audience to people and past events that they had never thought or maybe even heard of before. On a surface level, it underlines Freeland's ethos that she's able to make these connections, but on a deeper level, it all rests on presuppositions, strangely convenient presuppositions. In the following, aside from Freeland's use of pathos, appeal to emotion and pity, notice her frequent use of the personal pronoun I, and her intentionally slow speech rate, all emphasizing that this is about her experience, in case we choose to trust it, of course.
Victoria is an electrical engineer whom I met last month when I visited a world-leading clean tech company in Vancouver. You guys might want to consider it for co-ops. I'll tell you the name later. Except when I met Victoria in her lab, she told me we had actually met already, 11 months earlier. Her family had been living in Irpin, near Kyiv. Victoria, her husband, her daughter, and their cat fled the only country they had ever known and landed in May of last year at the airport in Winnipeg, where I stepped on board their plane to welcome the very first flight of Ukrainian refugees to Canada.
Freeland uses what this person allegedly told her to once again allude to the fact that she's been using euphemisms. In the following, notice the conjunction but, which, famously, minimizes or negates that which precedes it.
It is my profound hope that none of you will ever face the challenges Victoria has met and mastered. But whatever you encounter in this age of upheaval, you will be well served if you can muster some of Victoria's resilience.
She focuses on the positive term resilience to divert from the negative implications of it. This is classic reframing.
So how much is this marketing boo-boo, whatever you want to call it, costing Bud Light in the end? With the drop in sales, with the financial assistance, with the new ad campaign? I mean, you roll all that together, it sounds like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars?
We're focusing on investing behind the brand right now. So we're actually increasing the investment on Bud Light 3 times.
Now this Victoria is also part of the collective identity that Freeland wants the audience to think that they're part of, even though she's only used vague terms and deceptive presuppositions to create this collective identity. On this channel, we've seen another example of someone telling a narrative about someone else that's really about them.
And she described how she had escaped her home country. I still remember it so well. I remember my shock, and I also remember her courage. My recognition of how much continues to go on each day.
In order to mitigate the speech and thus further minimize the honesty and get people on her side, Freeland makes sure to flatter the audience and portray herself as relatable.
I also know that many of you, too many of you, raised these wonderful graduates without villages, alone or nearly so. And if you weren't alone all the time, I know, as a mother of 3, that it often felt that you were. But as I look out on this magnificent crowd, on the fruits of your labor of love, I can say that yours has been a job very, very well done. Congratulations, parents and grandparents. You're amazing.
Because of course she's able to know that, just by looking at the 5,717 graduates. This is when CR clashes with reality, because in reality she's not able to know anything about how remarkable they are, or whether or not their parents did a good job raising them. But CR dictates that that's what she should assume.
There are many ways to describe this transformational moment, but I think they all come down to one fundamental question. Does capitalist democracy still work?
Yes, that was the exact question I was wondering. I hope Freeland's kind enough to give us the answer.
And it is the question being posed by our shrinking glaciers and our warming oceans, which are asking us, wordlessly but emphatically, if democratic societies can rise to the existential challenge of climate change.
So apparently Freeland's willing to make all sorts of connections without substantiating them. This is presuppositional rhetoric to the nth degree. Here she exposes that her talk about times of tranquility is empty jargon because of course past generations have been worried about the climate and, dare I say, more urgent things than that. Still, this is an issue that she claims causes a time of upheaval. In that case, she's just conceded that there's never been or never will be a time of tranquility.
This is a time when we are being called to answer some very big questions. But I do not think that makes it, as Robert Kaplan has argued, a tragic age. Quite the contrary. I believe this age of upheaval has every possibility of becoming a time future historians will describe as the Renaissance of democracy, an age of renewal of our civilization's fundamental values and of its fundamental promise.
The level of specificity and clarity is just mind-blowing. Truly. What democracy? What kind of democracy? Trudeau's kind. Which values and what promise? This is as vague and ambiguous as it gets. She's simply using positive terms and presupposing that everyone knows what they mean. This is dishonest. I know what you're asking yourself. You're asking, can things get any worse? And the answer is yes, it can. In that regard, Freeland doesn't know how to fail.
Democracy is fighting back with Canada's $120 billion clean industrial policy, and with the Inflation Reduction Act here in the United States, which will bring down our emissions and create good-paying jobs for what Prime Minister Trudeau calls the middle class and those working hard to join it. Now,
Because that's exactly what a graduation speech should be. Politicians promoting themselves and their worldview, and having to beg for applause. This real agenda behind the speech exposes all the flattery for what it is, and exposes the vagueness for what it is, intentional and calculating. This case goes to show that a speaker can be presented as honorable and a doctor of public service, quote from world leaders and observers, and still deliver one of the most pretentious speeches ever. Unreliable historical connections, flattery, euphemisms, intentional vagueness, name-dropping. Apparently, being dressed in the right clothing doesn't necessarily mean that the speaker has anything to say. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some lawn mowing to do. I hope I have the necessary conviction and determination to do it. Wish me luck. If you liked the video, click the like button and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for tuning in.